I'ma beat it like a drum.
She had been cleaning the floors of that millionaire company for 13 years when the president heard her speak Russian, English, and German with a fluency that left everyone speechless. What happened next changed her life forever. This woman mastered 9 complete languages, but no one had noticed until that day. Before I tell you this incredible story, tell me, where are you watching us from? Write it in the comments. And if you want to know how a simple cleaning lady became an executive overnight, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the end of this story, which will impact you. Because what this millionaire did will restore your faith in humanity. The echo of footsteps resonated through the empty halls of Iberian Global Logistics as Maria Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart towards the top floor. It was 3 a.m, and the glass and steel building slept in silence, dimly lit by emergency lights that cast long shadows on the walls. Her hands, hardened by 13 years of night work, firmly held the damp cloth as she cleaned every surface with the precision of someone who knows every corner of their territory. Noche einmal vom Born, bitte, she murmured to herself, repeating the German phrase she'd heard on a podcast during her break. Her lips moved silently, practicing the correct pronunciation as she vacuumed the executive area carpet. In her pocket, her phone vibrated with WhatsApp messages from other parents at her daughter Sophia's school. Maria smiled, reading inquiries about the next day's parent meeting, quickly replying in the perfect Spanish she'd honed after years of helping Sophia with her homework. No one knew that the woman who cleaned their offices at night also translated complex documents for other immigrant parents at the school, or that she had memorized every irregular English verb while scrubbing floors. The elevator stopped on the 14th floor with a soft ding, and Maria began her usual routine. First the small offices, then the boardroom, and finally the president's office. Carlos Mendoza had left several newspapers on his desk: El País, Financial Times, Die Welt, and something that looked like a document in Japanese. Maria couldn't resist glancing at the kanji text, her eyes automatically scanning the characters she had learned to recognize. Kore wa musukashi desu ne, she whispered, identifying the complexity of the financial document. A translation error had turned annual profits into projected losses, a misunderstanding that could cost millions. The sound of keys startled her. No one should be in the building at that hour. Maria quickly turned off the office light and hid behind the desk, her heart pounding. Footsteps approached, accompanied by voices speaking a language she immediately recognized: Russian. Dokumenti должны быть здесь, a deep male voice said. Maria closed her eyes, mentally translating. The documents should be here. Her breathing became shallow as she realized they were looking for something specific in that office. They weren't common thieves. They spoke of contracts, numbers, something related to the company's international expansion. The men approached the desk where she was hiding, and Maria could see their Italian leather shoes under the table. One of them picked up the Japanese document she had been reading moments earlier. Itone tosten am nusno, the other murmured, clearly frustrated. This isn't what we need, Maria translated in her mind, and a bold idea began to form. She knew exactly which document they were looking for. She had seen the Russian original in Elena Herrera's office 2 floors below. But revealing her presence would mean exposing herself, breaking the invisibility that had been her shield all these years. The sound of more footsteps in the hallway made her make a decision. The men tensed, quickly put away the papers, and Maria heard them heading towards the emergency staircase. In a few seconds, the floor fell silent again. Maria slowly emerged from her hiding spot, her legs trembling from adrenaline. On the desk, the Japanese document was gone, but there was something else. A business card with Cyrillic text the men had dropped in their haste. Thomas Volkov, Международные инвестиции. Thomas Volkov, International Investments, she read mentally. Maria put the card in her pocket, unaware that this small gesture would change the course of her life forever. Monday morning arrived with a fine rain that blurred the windows of the LGI building. Carlos Mendoza was heading to his office, distractedly observing the morning activity in the main lobby, when a melodious voice stopped him dead in his tracks. Dobro pожаловать в Madrid. Office gospodina Mendoza nahodится na 14 etage. Carlos slowly turned, searching for the source of that fluid and perfectly pronounced Russian. His eyes landed on a middle-aged woman, dressed in the navy blue uniform of the cleaning staff, who was kindly gesturing while guiding a visitor to the elevators. "Thank you so much for your help," the same woman continued, now addressing a delivery person waiting with a package. "Mr. Mendoza's assistant will be down in 5 minutes to sign for this." Carlos frowned, approaching discreetly. The woman seemed to be one of the night cleaning staff, but she spoke English with an impeccable, almost British accent. "The supply office is on the second floor," she was now explaining in German to a seemingly lost supplier. "Sie können den Fahrstuhl dort drüben nehmen." Who the hell is this woman? Carlos thought, approaching with determined steps. The employee, Maria, as her ID read, was cordially saying goodbye to the German when she felt a presence behind her. "Excuse me," Carlos said, with a mix of curiosity and authority in his voice. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Maria turned, and for the first time in 13 years, she found herself face to face with the company president. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Mr. Mendoza. How can I help you? I just heard you speak in how many languages? Russian, English, German?" "Yes, sir. I apologize if I've caused any inconvenience. I was just helping the visitors to—" No, Carlos interrupted, raising a hand. "It's not an inconvenience at all. It's surprising. How many languages do you speak exactly?" Maria hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching for an exit towards the elevators where she could take refuge in her usual anonymity. But something in Carlos's genuinely interested expression made her respond with honesty. 9 spoken languages, sir, and I read classical Latin." Carlos felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. For years, he had been hiring external translators, paying fortunes for interpretation services, struggling with cultural misunderstandings in international negotiations, and all this time, he had a polyglot working in his own building. 9 languages, he repeated, almost incredulously. "Which ones exactly? Spanish, Russian, English, German, French, Japanese, Italian, Arabic, and Spanish Sign Language," Maria enumerated, each word pronounced with the precision of someone who had meticulously studied them. The lobby seemed to have fallen silent around them. Carlos noticed that several employees had slowed their pace, clearly intrigued by the conversation between the president and the cleaning lady. "Where did you study?" Carlos asked, his business mind already evaluating the possibilities. Maria smiled with a mix of nostalgia and pain that didn't go unnoticed. "University of Seville. Philology, but circumstances changed. What circumstances? For a moment, Maria considered giving an evasive answer, maintaining the invisible barrier she had built between her personal and professional life. But something in Carlos's eyes, an authentic curiosity she hadn't seen in years, made her continue. My mother got cancer during my second year of my master's. I had to drop out to take care of her. 6 months after she passed away, my father had a heart attack. I was left alone with a 5-year-old girl. Carlos felt a lump in his throat. The image of this woman scrubbing floors at night while raising a daughter alone, all while continuing to cultivate her extraordinary linguistic talent, deeply moved him. And how did you keep studying languages? I never stopped, Maria replied, with a determination that lit up her eyes. Second-hand books, podcasts, online newspapers, conversations with tourists in the park where my daughter played. Languages don't care about schedules or university degrees. At that moment, Carlos made a decision that would change not only Maria's life, but the entire culture of his company. Maria, would you be available Wednesday morning? I have a meeting with German executives, and I might need linguistic consulting. Maria blinked, unable to believe what she had just heard. Linguistic consulting, sir. Yes, and I think we should talk more about your future in this company. Wednesday dawned gray and tense at the LGI offices. Maria had spent the previous night reviewing technical vocabulary in German, reading financial reports and commercial documents, until her eyes burned. Sophia had found her in the kitchen at 6 a.m, surrounded by dictionaries and handwritten notes. Mom, why do you have so many papers? Her 13-year-old daughter had asked while preparing her breakfast. I have an important opportunity at work, my love. It could change our lives. Now, standing in front of the employee bathroom mirror on the 12th floor, Maria adjusted the white blouse she had bought the night before with her savings. It wasn't an executive suit, but it was the best she could afford. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied a little lipstick, the only luxury she had indulged in for months. Good morning, Maria. Carlos's voice startled her as she left the bathroom. Ready for the meeting? Yes, sir. I've reviewed the documents you sent me and have some observations about the Germans' proposals. Carlos looked at her with renewed interest. Observations? There are subtleties in their contractual language that could be causing misunderstandings. In German, Verpflichtung has stronger connotations than the word compromise in Spanish. They are talking about binding legal obligations, not commercial intentions. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Carlos gestured for Maria to enter first. Anything else? Mr. Hoffman mentioned the word Vertragsbruch in his email. It's not just a breach of contract. It implies a violation that could have criminal consequences under German law. I believe there's more tension in this negotiation than you perceive. When the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, Maria felt all eyes on her. Several LGI executives were gathered in the reception area, clearly surprised to see the cleaning lady accompanying the president. Gentlemen, Carlos announced with authority, I'd like to introduce Maria Rodriguez, our new linguistic consultant for this meeting. Murmurs were immediate. Elena Herrera, the senior director, raised an eyebrow skeptically. Victor Ramirez, international operations manager, exchanged significant glances with other colleagues. The arrival of the German delegation cut short the speculation. 3 suited men entered the main boardroom, led by Klaus Hoffmann, an executive in his 60s, with a serious expression and precise movements. Good morning, Hoffmann greeted, shaking Carlos's hand. I hope we can have productive conversations today. Maria approached discreetly. Mr. Hoffmann, welcome to Madrid. I am Maria Rodriguez. and I will be working as your interpreter today." The transformation on Hoffmann's face was immediate. His features relaxed, and for the first time, he smiled genuinely. "Endlich jemand, der unsere Sprache wirklich versteht," he exclaimed, turning to his colleagues. "Das ist eine angenehme Überraschung." For the next 3 hours, Maria not only translated words, but navigated between cultures. She explained to the Spanish why the Germans needed more time for decisions, and helped the Germans understand that Spanish flexibility didn't mean a lack of seriousness. "Wenn ich das richtig verstehe," Maria intervened during a tense moment. "Ihre Hauptsorge ist die Lieferfrist, nicht der Preis, richtig?" Hoffmann nodded vigorously. "Genau. Zeit ist für uns wichtiger als Geld." Maria turned to Carlos and his team. Their main concern isn't the cost, it's the delivery times. In German business culture, meeting deadlines is more critical than optimizing prices. The meeting ended with cordial handshakes and the promise of a contract that had been stalled for months. When the Germans left, Hoffmann personally approached Maria. "Frau Rodriguez, Sie sind außergewöhnlich. Wir haben selten so kompetente Dolmetscher erlebt." After the visitors left, the room fell silent. Carlos observed Maria with an expression that mixed admiration and something that seemed like regret. "How on earth have we had this talent hidden for 13 years?" he murmured, more to himself than to those present. Elena Herrera cleared her throat. "Carlos, we need to talk. In private." But Carlos had already made a decision. He addressed Maria directly, ignoring the expectant glances of the rest of the team. "Maria, starting Monday, you will no longer work the night shift." Maria's heart stopped for a moment. Was she being fired? "You will be our new cultural advisor for international affairs. Office on the 12th floor, executive salary, and a budget for professional attire." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Maria felt the floor moving beneath her feet and had to lean on the table to maintain her balance. "Mr. Mendoza," she whispered, unable to believe what she had just heard. But the expression on Elena Herrera's face told her that the real battle was just beginning. That night, Maria sat in the small kitchen of her apartment in Carabanchel, her hands trembling around a cup of cold tea. The business card Carlos had given her rested on the scratched table, next to an envelope with an advance for her first month as a cultural advisor. The amount was more than she earned in 3 months cleaning offices. "Mom, why are you crying?" Sophia asked, entering the kitchen in her unicorn pajamas with a worried expression. "I'm not crying, my love. It's just, sometimes good things scare us too." Sophia sat next to her, with the premature wisdom of children who have grown up too fast. "Is it because of the new job?" Maria nodded, unable to find words. For 13 years, she had built a life in the shadows, invisible, but safe. Now, suddenly, she had been pushed into the light, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what that meant. Her phone vibrated with a WhatsApp message from Carmen, her night shift colleague. "Is it true what they're saying? That they're going to make you an executive? The girls are commenting that there must be something fishy." Maria closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of judgments and speculations. In her experience, when a woman like her got an opportunity, there was always someone ready to question how she got it. Her phone vibrated again, this time with an unknown number. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Klaus Hoffmann. I've spoken with Mr. Mendoza about you. My company would be interested in your consulting services. Could we talk?" Maria read the message 3 times before fully understanding what it meant. A German company was contacting her directly, recognizing her professional value. For the first time in years, someone saw her not as the cleaning lady who coincidentally spoke languages, but as a competent professional. But her moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of her landline phone, a device almost no one used anymore. It was her sister Pilar, calling from Seville. "Maria, I heard a very strange story about you. They say you're now an executive at a big company in Madrid." "It's true, Pilar. I've been promoted." "Promoted? You clean offices, Maria. Don't make up stories." The familiar contempt in her sister's voice struck her like a slap. Pilar had always been the successful one in the family, married to a notary, living in a big house, sending her children to private schools. Maria was the one who had gotten pregnant and ruined her life. "I'm not making it up, Pilar. I speak 9 languages, and they're going to pay me to use them." "9 languages? Please, Maria. Talking to tourists in the park doesn't count as being a polyglot." After hanging up, Maria stared blankly, feeling the voices of the past trying to drag her back into the small box where everyone expected her to remain. The girl who had excelled in school, who had won scholarships, who had dreamed of being a university professor, had vanished under years of survival and responsibilities. Sophia approached and took her hand. "Mom, I've heard you speak those languages when you help the parents at school. You're the smartest person I know." Her daughter's words were like a balm. Maria remembered the nights when Sophia was little, how she told her stories in different languages, how the child fell asleep listening to lullabies in Russian, German, or French. Her daughter had grown up knowing her mother was special, even when the rest of the world didn't see it. "You know what, my love? Tomorrow we're going shopping. Your mom needs new clothes for her office." "A real office?" "A real office, with windows overlooking the city and a spinning chair." For the first time in weeks, Maria genuinely smiled. She had spent years being invisible, but invisibility had also been her strength. She had observed, she had learned, she had studied in silence. Now it was time to use everything she had accumulated during those years in the shadows. She got up and went to the small closet where she kept her language books, dictionaries, worn-out novels in multiple languages, notebooks filled with verb conjugations. Each book told the story of a night stolen from sleep, an hour less of rest, a dream that had refused to abandon her. She took her favorite notebook, one where she had translated Pushkin's poems into Spanish, and wrote on the first clean page, "Tomorrow I begin a new life, not as a different woman, but as the woman I always was." Finally visible. On the 14th floor of LGI, Carlos Mendoza worked late, reviewing the company's organizational chart. There was something deeply unsettling about the fact that Maria had been there for 13 years without anyone noticing her potential. How many other talents were they wasting? How many other voices remained silent? His reflection was interrupted by a knock at the door. Elena Herrera entered without waiting for a response, a folder under her arm and a determined expression. "Carlos, we need to talk about your impulsive decision with Maria Rodriguez." "It wasn't impulsive, Elena. It was obviously necessary. A woman without a university degree, without executive experience, without business management training, and you put her in a position that requires exactly what she has: exceptional linguistic competence, cultural intelligence, and the ability to build genuine connections with international partners." Elena placed the folder on the desk with a sharp thud. "I have here the resumes of 5 external consultants with master's degrees, proven international experience, and references from Fortune 500 companies. Any of them would be a more appropriate choice. Carlos opened the folder and glanced through the resumes. Impressive degrees, impeccable experiences, brilliant recommendations. But he remembered the look on Hoffman's face when Maria had navigated not just between languages, but between entire cultural worlds. Elena, how long have we been trying to close the German contract? 8 months, but Maria resolved it in 3 hours, not because she had a degree hanging on the wall, but because she understood not just the words, but the intentions, the anxieties, the cultural expectations that we had been misinterpreting for months. Elena crossed her arms, clearly frustrated. Carlos, I know your intentions are noble, but this is going to set a dangerous precedent. Employees will think they can skip the hierarchy, that formal training doesn't matter, that talent can be found anywhere, and that our job as leaders is to recognize and cultivate it, regardless of the uniform someone wears. The silence that followed was tense. Elena picked up her folder, but before leaving, she turned once more. I hope you know what you're doing, Carlos, because if this goes wrong, it won't just be Maria who pays the consequences. After Elena left, Carlos was left alone with his thoughts. He knew he had disturbed more than just an organizational structure. He had challenged a worldview where a person's value was measured by external credentials instead of internal capabilities. But he also knew that sometimes the most important changes began with decisions others considered imprudent. From his window, he could see the lights of Madrid stretching towards the horizon. Thousands of illuminated windows representing thousands of lives, some visible, others hidden, but all containing stories, talents, dreams waiting to be discovered. On Monday morning, Maria stopped in front of the elevator mirror on the 12th floor, adjusting the black blazer she had carefully chosen at El Corte Inglés. It was a modest but elegant suit, bought with a mix of excitement and terror, while Sophia encouraged her from the dressing room. Floor 12, the metallic voice of the elevator announced, and Maria felt breathless. The office Carlos had assigned her was small but bright, with a window overlooking the Gran Via and a view she had never imagined having. On the desk was a golden plaque that read, Maria Rodriguez, Cultural Advisor for International Affairs, and seeing it, she had to sit in the new swivel chair to process the reality of her situation. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Carmen, her former night shift colleague, who looked at her with a mix of curiosity and what might have been envy. So it's true, Carmen said, observing the office. They've put you up here with the big shots. Carmen, I hope you know this doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't change anything? Carmen laughed bitterly. Maria, you now earn in 1 month what I earn in 4. Of course, it changes everything. Before Maria could reply, Carmen had already left, leaving behind a trail of resentment that weighed on Maria's heart like a stone. She didn't have much time to process the conversation, because at 9 o'clock, Victor Ramirez appeared at her door, with a thick folder under his arm and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good morning, Maria. I hope you're comfortable in your new office. Thank you, Victor. I'm adapting. Perfect, because I have some projects that could benefit from your linguistic expertise. Victor placed the folder on her desk with a thud that sounded louder than necessary. We have pending contracts with suppliers in Tokyo, Milan, and Dubai. The documents are in their original languages, obviously, and we've had some problems with external translations. I thought you could take a look at them. Maria opened the folder and felt her mouth go dry. These weren't simple documents. They were complex international supply contracts, distribution agreements with specific technical clauses, legal documents that required not only linguistic knowledge, but also a deep understanding of international commercial law. "When do you need them by?" she asked, trying to keep her voice firm. "By Friday. I know it's a short time, but I'm sure someone with your extraordinary abilities won't have any problems." The sarcastic tone was subtle, but unmistakable. Victor was testing her, hoping she would fail, hoping she would prove that promoting her had been a mistake. "I'll have them ready," Maria replied with more confidence than she felt. After Victor left, Maria was left alone with the documents. The first contract, in Japanese, dealt with electronic components with technical specifications she had never seen before. The second, in Italian, contained legal terms that required an understanding of European legislation. The third, in Arabic, included specific cultural clauses of Muslim commercial law. For a moment, panic flooded her. What had she done? How had she thought she could handle responsibilities of this level? But then she remembered her daughter's words. "You're the smartest person I know." And something deeper activated within her. The same determination that had led her to study Russian by listening to cassette tapes while scrubbing floors. The same insatiable curiosity that had driven her to memorize German conjugations during her breaks. She opened her new computer and began to work. Every unknown term became an exhaustive search. Every complex clause a challenge to solve. She called contacts she had made over the years, helping immigrant families. A Syrian lawyer who explained the subtleties of Arab commercial law. A retired Japanese professor who clarified technical terminology. An Italian businessman who helped her with legal regionalisms. At 2 a.m, she was still working under the light of her desk lamp, with specialized dictionaries, open around her computer like the petals of an academic flower. It wasn't just translating. It was understanding cultures, legislations, implicit expectations that could make the difference between the success and failure of a multi-million-dollar negotiation. When she finished the last document at 4 a.m. on Friday, Maria felt like she had run an intellectual marathon. But she also experienced something she hadn't felt in years. The deep satisfaction of having used every fiber of her capacity, of having risen to a challenge that others considered impossible for her. On Friday morning, she placed the completed folder on Victor's desk, along with a detailed report highlighting inconsistencies in previous translations, problematic clauses that could lead to legal conflicts, and suggestions for improving contractual terms. Victor opened the folder with the expression of someone expecting to find obvious errors. But as he read, his face gradually changed. The translations were not only correct, they were superior to any work they had received from external consultants. How did you know that the term zarar in the Arabic contract could be interpreted as intentional damage instead of commercial loss? He asked, genuinely surprised. Because for years, I helped Moroccan families with legal documents in my neighborhood. I learned that cultural context can completely change the legal meaning of a word. Victor slowly closed the folder, and for the first time since Maria had received the promotion, he looked at her not as an intruder, but as a competent colleague. "Maria, I have to admit I underestimated your preparation. This work is exceptional." That afternoon, as Maria organized her office for the weekend, she found an envelope someone had slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Lucia. I work in accounting. I wanted to thank you for what you're doing. I've been here for 10 years, and I never thought someone like us could get this far. You've given me hope. Thank you for showing us it's possible." Maria felt her eyes well up with tears. She hadn't thought her promotion could inspire others, that her visibility could become a beacon for those who also felt invisible. But her moment of triumph was tarnished when, upon leaving the building, she encountered a group of her former night shift colleagues. Carmen was among them, and the tension was palpable. "Look who's coming," one of them murmured. "The new executive." "Don't you know us anymore, Maria?" Carmen asked acidly. "Or now that you have your own office, are we too unimportant for you?" Maria stopped, feeling the weight of their accusing glances. For 13 years, these women had been her nocturnal family, sharing breaks, worries, small joys. Now they looked at her like a stranger. "Please," Maria said, approaching them. "I'm still the same person. I'm still Maria from Carabanchel, the one who helped your children with their homework, the one who translated school letters for you. But now you have a suit and an office with windows," Carmen retorted, "and we're still scrubbing their floors." The phrase hit Maria like a slap. She realized that her success, however deserved, had created a painful division with the people who had supported her the most for years. "Carmen, I didn't choose to be born with an aptitude for languages, but I also didn't choose to work 13 years at night, raise my daughter alone, or clean up drunk executives' vomit. The only thing I chose was not to give up, to keep studying, to keep believing that someday someone would see what I could do." Her words cut through the cold Madrid night air. Some of her former colleagues lowered their gaze, recognizing the truth in what she said. "And now that they've seen it," Maria continued, her voice breaking with emotion, "all I want is to show that all of us have more value than we're recognized for, that we deserve more than we're given, that we are more than they see." Carmen slowly approached, and, to Maria's surprise, hugged her. "Forgive me," she whispered. "It's just hard to see you leave when we're still here." "I haven't left," Maria replied, returning the hug. "I've just changed floors, but I'm still one of you." That night, while having dinner with Sophia in their small kitchen, Maria reflected on the day's events. Professional success had come with an emotional price she hadn't anticipated. The loneliness of being between two worlds, being too humble for the executives, and too elevated for her former colleagues. "Mom," Sophia said, interrupting her thoughts. "At school, they asked me what job you had now. I told them you were the smartest woman in Spain, and that someone had finally realized it." Maria smiled, feeling her heart swell with love and pride. Regardless of the challenges she faced in her new position, she had something no university degree could grant: the unconditional admiration of the person she loved most in the world. On the Monday of her 3rd week in her new position, Maria found herself face to face with Elena Herrera in the elevator. The senior director had obviously been avoiding her, but the confined space of the elevator made the encounter inevitable. "Good morning, Elena," Maria greeted politely. Elena responded with a cold nod, but when the elevator paused between floors for a moment, she took the opportunity. "Maria, I think we need to have a clear conversation about your current situation." "My situation?" "Your appointment. Carlos can be very generous, but business reality is less romantic than his philanthropic impulses." Elena's words were carefully chosen to sting, and Maria felt their impact, but she had learned over the years to maintain composure under pressure. "If you have specific concerns about my performance, I'm open to discussing them." "Performance?" Elena laughed humorlessly. "Maria, translating documents is not the same as directing international strategy. Speaking languages doesn't equate to understanding global markets, and resolving a misunderstanding with Germans doesn't make you a business consultant. The elevator started moving again, but Elena wasn't finished. "You're lucky Carlos is sentimental, but feelings don't run successful companies. Data does, experience does, academic training does." When the doors opened on the 12th floor, Maria exited without responding, but Elena's words had planted seeds of doubt that grew throughout the morning. Was she really competent for this position, or had she just been lucky so far? Her insecurity was interrupted by a call from Klaus Hoffmann in Germany. "Frau Rodriguez, we have a delicate situation. Our partners in Tokyo are considering canceling an important contract due to cultural misunderstandings. Could you join us for a video conference this afternoon? Your fee, of course, would be independent of your work with LGI." Maria felt a mix of excitement and terror. A German company was hiring her directly, recognizing her value as an international consultant. But it also meant more responsibility, more opportunities to fail publicly. At 4 in the afternoon, she connected to the video conference from LGI's boardroom. Faces from Munich, Tokyo, and Osaka appeared on the screen. The German executives looked tense. The Japanese maintained impassive expressions that she had learned to interpret over years of cultural study. "The problem," Hoffmann explained, "is that our Japanese colleagues feel offended by something in the negotiations, but we don't know exactly what." Maria asked to speak directly in Japanese with the Tokyo team. For the next 20 minutes, she carefully navigated between direct and indirect questions, respecting Japanese courtesy protocols until she reached the core of the problem. "Herr Hoffmann," she finally said, addressing the camera, "the problem isn't technical or financial. It's cultural." In a previous meeting, someone from the German team interrupted Mr. Tanaka while he was presenting his proposal. In Japanese business culture, that's perceived as a fundamental lack of respect that calls the entire business relationship into question. "An interruption?" Hoffmann asked incredulously. "This whole conflict is because of an interruption?" In Japan, the concept of mensu, or personal prestige, is crucial in business. The interruption was not only rude, it was a public humiliation that requires formal reparation before any negotiation can continue. Maria explained the specific apology protocol needed, including the required level of formality, the hierarchical order of interventions, and even the specific terms that should be used in Japanese for the apology to be acceptable. 2 hours later, the Germans and Japanese had resolved the conflict. The contract was saved, and Maria had won her first independent, international client. When the call ended, she found Carlos waiting for her at the boardroom door. "Did you just save a €50 million contract between Germans and Japanese?" "I think so," Maria replied, still processing what had happened. "Maria, do you realize what you just did? You didn't just solve a linguistic problem. You navigated 3 different business cultures, identified the psychological root of an international conflict, and designed a solution that respected the sensitivities of all parties." For the first time since her conversation with Elena, Maria felt that perhaps she did belong in this world. "That's exactly what I did when I helped resolve conflicts between parents of different nationalities at Sophia's school, only now it involves more money." Carlos laughed, but his expression immediately turned serious. "Maria, I have to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Do you feel ready for more responsibilities? Because after what I've just witnessed, I have bigger plans for you." And before she could reply, Elena Herrera appeared in the hallway, clearly having overheard part of the conversation. "Carlos, can we talk about the company's organizational future?" The tension in the air was palpable. Maria realized that the time for a definitive confrontation had come, not just with Elena, but with her own doubts about whether she truly deserved to be there. "Elena," Maria said, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. "I think it's time we talked directly. All cards on the table." Elena raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting Maria to take the initiative. "Very well, let's talk." The main boardroom had become an impromptu tribunal. Elena Herrera sat at the end of the table, a thick folder in front of her, while Carlos occupied the head, and Maria settled into a chair that felt too big for her. Several other directors had been summoned: Victor Ramirez, Financial Director Alberto Sanchez, and Head of Human Resources Patricia Vega. "Before we begin," Elena said, opening her folder with deliberate movements, "I want to make it clear that this isn't personal against Maria. It's about professional standards and organizational precedents." Maria felt her mouth go dry, but she kept her back straight. For 13 years, she had remained invisible. Now she was under the most intense spotlight of her life. "Maria Rodriguez," Elena continued, reading from her notes, "does not have a complete university degree, lacks previous executive experience, has not received business management training, and has never led large-scale teams or projects. However, she has been given a position of responsibility that traditionally requires at least a master's degree and 10 years of corporate experience." Carlos shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Elena raised a hand to continue. "Even more problematic is the message this sends to the rest of the organization. We have employees with MBAs waiting for promotions, professionals with years of experience who see someone without their credentials suddenly surpass them." Patricia Vega nodded slowly. "Elena has a valid point about internal promotion policies." Maria took a deep breath. She had anticipated this moment since her first day in the new office. "May I respond?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. "Of course," Carlos said, looking at her expectantly. Maria stood up, feeling she needed all her height for what she was about to say. "Elena, you're right. I don't have a completed university degree, nor do I have traditional executive experience, but I do have 13 years of observational experience in this company, studying its operations, understanding its challenges, identifying its patterns." She walked towards the window, gathering courage. "During these years, I've seen poorly translated documents that cost millions in contracts. I've listened to calls where cultural misunderstandings destroyed business relationships that took years to build. I've witnessed lost opportunities because no one in the boardroom understood the subtleties of what our international partners were truly communicating." She turned to Elena, facing her directly. "In 3 weeks, I've corrected 2 supplier contracts that contained errors that could have resulted in lawsuits. I unlocked an agreement with Morocco that had been stalled for 8 months because I identified that the problem wasn't economic, but procedural. And 2 hours ago, I saved a €50 million contract between our German and Japanese partners." Elena crossed her arms. "Isolated incidents do not constitute systematic executive competence." "Isolated incidents?" Maria felt indignation empower her. "Elena, do you know why the Dubai contract fell through last year? Because the external translator translated strategic partnership into foreign control, which violated Islamic investment laws. I would have known that. Do you know why we lost the Korean client 6 months ago? Because no one understood that when they said, 'We will carefully consider it,' in their culture, that means absolutely not. I would have interpreted it correctly." The room fell silent. Maria continued, feeling years of silent observation flowing through her words. "You talk about academic credentials, Elena. Do you know how many hours I've studied languages? How many nights I've spent reading about international cultures? How many books on international commercial law I've devoured in public libraries after my shifts? She approached the table, placing her palms on the polished surface. The difference between you and me isn't that your training is superior. It's that mine has been invisible. But invisible doesn't mean non-existent. Alberto Sanchez, who had remained silent until then, cleared his throat. Maria, we understand your passion, but Elena has valid concerns about precedents. If we promote based on natural talent instead of formal qualifications, then what? Maria interrupted. Could we discover more wasted talents? Could we find competencies that have been hidden under uniforms and job titles? Would that really be so terrible? Carlos gently tapped the table. Maria has an important point. We've been looking for talent externally, while we had exceptional capabilities right under our noses. Elena leaned forward, playing her strongest card. Carlos, I know your intentions are admirable, but emotions cannot drive business decisions. We need data, not inspirational stories. You want data? Maria asked, feeling something fierce awaken within her. She walked to the whiteboard and began to write. Numbers. German contract. Resolved in one meeting after 8 months of stagnation. Value. 12 million euros. Time saved on external translation. 40 hours. Cost avoided. 15,000 euros. Japanese contract from this afternoon. Saved in 2 hours. Value. 50 million euros. Commercial relationship preserved. Invaluable. Documents from Dubai, Tokyo, and Milan. Errors identified and corrected that could have resulted in litigation worth 5 million euros combined. She turned to Elena, who had paled slightly. In 3 weeks, I've generated or preserved value of approximately 67 million euros for this company. Do you want more data? The room fell into absolute silence. Victor Ramirez looked at Elena, who for the first time seemed to have no immediate answer. The numbers don't lie, Alberto murmured. Patricia Vega nodded slowly. And these are measurable results in a very short period. Elena closed her folder with a sharp snap, but she had lost her dominant authority. Short-term results don't guarantee long-term competence. You're right, Maria replied, with a calmness that surprised even herself. But neither do university degrees. The difference is that I've proven my worth in real situations, under real pressure, with real consequences. Carlos stood up, clearly having made a decision. This conversation has been illuminating. Maria, please prepare a detailed report of all your projects to date. Elena, I want you to review the numbers Maria has presented and give me your analysis. As the other executives began to leave the room, Elena approached Maria. This isn't over, she murmured, but there was less venom in her voice and more reluctant respect. I didn't expect it to be over, Maria replied, but I didn't expect it to start either. And here we are. That night, as Maria had dinner with Sophia, her daughter asked her why she seemed so tired. I had to defend myself today, my love. I had to prove that I deserve to be where I am. And did you prove it? Maria smiled, feeling for the first time that the answer was clear and undeniable. Yes, I think so. The days following the confrontation in the boardroom brought a subtle but perceptible change in the atmosphere at LGI. Maria noticed longer glances in the hallways, conversations that stopped when she appeared, whispers that could have been of admiration or criticism. The invisibility that had been her companion for 13 years had been replaced by a hyper-visibility that made her feel as if she were performing on a stage. On Wednesday morning, as she checked emails in her office, there was a gentle knock at her door. It was Ana Morales, a young intern from the marketing department, whom Maria remembered seeing cleaning glasses in the kitchen after late-night meetings. "Excuse me, Ms. Rodriguez. Could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Ana. Sit down." The girl sat down nervously in the chair in front of the desk, twisting a piece of paper in her hands. "I've been following your story, what you've achieved, and I wanted to ask you something." Maria nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. "I study translation and interpretation at night after work. I speak English, French, and Italian fluently, and I'm learning Mandarin Chinese, but no one here knows why. Well, because I'm just the intern who makes photocopies." Maria's heart raced. It was like looking in a mirror of the past. "What do you want to ask me, Ana? How do I take the step? How do I make them see me as more than what I appear to be?" Maria leaned back in her chair, recalling her own struggle with that same question for years. "Ana, have you identified any situations where your linguistic skills could be useful for the company?" "Yes," Ana replied with more confidence. "The marketing department has been struggling with the campaign for the French market. I've seen the materials, and there are cultural errors that could be problematic, but I don't know how to address the issue without seeming presumptuous." Maria smiled, perfectly recognizing the dilemma. "You know what, Ana? I'm going to give you the same advice I would have given myself a month ago. Prepare a concrete proposal, identify the specific problems, offer detailed solutions, and present your analysis to the relevant person. Don't talk about your abilities in the abstract. Demonstrate them with real work." Ana nodded vigorously, taking mental notes. "But Ana," Maria added, "also be prepared for resistance. Not everyone will celebrate you demonstrating competencies they didn't expect from you." After Ana left, Maria reflected on the conversation. She realized that her promotion had created more than just controversy. It had opened a window of possibility for other employees who had felt invisible or underestimated. Her reflection was interrupted by a call from Klaus Hoffmann. "Frau Rodriguez, I have an interesting proposal. We're organizing a conference on intercultural communication in business in Barcelona next month. Would you be interested in being one of our main speakers?" Maria felt her breath catch. "Keynote speaker? Klaus, I'm not an academic or an internationally recognized consultant." "Exactly why we want you to speak. Your story represents something the industry urgently needs to hear. How real talent manifests in unexpected ways, and how organizations can be wasting extraordinary human resources due to structural biases." After hanging up, Maria stared blankly. An international conference would mean public exposure, the possibility of inspiring others, but also the risk of large-scale failure. Her contemplation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Elena Herrera, who entered her office without knocking. "Maria, we need to talk." "Of course. What's wrong?" Elena sat down, but this time her posture was different, less aggressive, more thoughtful. "I've been reviewing the numbers you presented last week, and I've made some calls to verify the cases you mentioned." Maria waited, not knowing what to expect. "The data is irrefutable. Not only have you generated value for the company, you've prevented significant losses that we would have suffered without your intervention." Elena paused, clearly struggling with something internally. "I've also spoken with our German and Japanese partners. Their comments about your work have been exceptional." "Elena, if this is an apology—" "It's not an apology," Elena interrupted abruptly. "It's an acknowledgement that perhaps our traditional talent evaluation criteria have limitations I hadn't considered." Maria leaned forward, intrigued by this more vulnerable side of Elena. What do you mean? I mean that I've spent 20 years in this industry, assuming that competence manifested in predictable ways. Prestigious degrees, experience at recognized companies, linear career paths. But your case suggests that real talent can develop in completely different contexts. Elena stood up and walked to the window. Do you know what my biggest concern is now, Maria? It's not that you don't have the traditional qualifications. It's that if you can be in this company for 13 years without anyone noticing your potential, how many other talents are we losing? How many other opportunities are we wasting because of our structural blindness? It was the most honest conversation Maria had ever had with Elena, and it fundamentally changed her perception of the senior director. Elena, I think your concern is valid, and I think we could do something about it. What do you have in mind? How about we develop a pilot program to identify hidden talents within the company? Not to replace traditional hiring processes, but to complement them with a broader search for existing competencies. Elena turned, with an expression that mixed skepticism and interest. You're proposing that we institutionalize cases like yours. I'm proposing that we recognize that talent doesn't always wear a suit and tie, and that competence doesn't always come with framed certificates. For the first time since they had known each other, Elena genuinely smiled at Maria. That's a very ambitious proposal, and very risky. The best organizational changes usually are. Elena nodded slowly. Prepare a detailed proposal. If you can design a program that identifies talent without compromising professional standards, you could have my support. After Elena left, Maria realized that something extraordinary had happened. Not only had she defended her own position, she had planted the seeds for a broader change that could benefit invisible employees throughout the company. That night, while preparing dinner, Sophia found her smiling while peeling potatoes. Why are you so happy, Mom? Because I think I'll be able to help more people like me, my love. People with talents no one has seen yet. Like Anna from marketing? Maria was surprised. You know Anna? She helped me with a school project about France. She speaks French better than my teacher, but she told me no one at her job knows it. Maria hugged her daughter, marveling at how human connections created invisible networks of support and recognition. Exactly like Anna, my love, and like many other people who are waiting for their opportunity. 3 weeks after her conversation with Elena, Maria found herself working late on the proposal for the internal talent identification program. She had named the initiative Project Voice, a name that reflected its goal of giving a voice to silenced competencies within the organization. Her desk was covered with studies on talent development, case studies of companies that had transformed their internal cultures, and testimonials from employees she had been discreetly collecting for weeks. Ana Morales had been the first to respond to her informal call to identify hidden talents. The young woman had prepared a comprehensive analysis of the French marketing campaign, pointing out not only linguistic errors, but also cultural misunderstandings that could have alienated the target market. Her work was so impressive that the marketing director had requested an urgent meeting with Maria to discuss the implications. But Anna wasn't an isolated case. In recent weeks, Maria had discovered that Roberto, the IT technician, had developed automatic translation algorithms in his free time that surpassed the commercial systems the company was considering buying. Lucia, from accounting, had a master's degree in international economics that she had never mentioned because no one had asked her. And Manuel, from the courier service, spoke fluent Mandarin after years working in Madrid's Chinatown. It's as if I've been living in a completely different company for 13 years. Maria murmured, reviewing her conversation notes. Her phone vibrated with a message from Klaus Hoffmann. Conference confirmed for Barcelona. 500 attendees from 20 countries. Your speech will be the central moment of the event. Are you ready to change international perspectives? Maria felt a familiar dizziness. In just a few months, she had gone from being invisible to being invited as a keynote speaker at an international conference. The responsibility was terrifying, but also exhilarating. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Carlos, but he was accompanied by a woman Maria didn't recognize. Elegant, about 40 years old, with the natural confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Maria, I'd like to introduce Isabella Morrison, Director of Organizational Development at the international consulting firm Brennan & Associates. Isabella, this is Maria Rodriguez, whom I've told you about. Isabella extended her hand with a professional smile. Ms. Rodriguez, your story has reached us in London. We are very interested in understanding how your company has managed to identify and develop talent in such innovative ways. Maria exchanged glances with Carlos, who gestured for her to take the lead. Ms. Morrison, I'm not sure we've achieved anything systematic yet. My case might have simply been fortunate. Fortunate? Isabella sat down, opening a tablet where she had taken extensive notes. Ms. Rodriguez, we have analyzed your progression at LGI. In 3 months, you have generated measurable value of more than 80 million euros, resolved international conflicts that had frustrated specialized consultants, and identified at least 6 employees with underutilized competencies within your organization. Maria blinked, surprised by the specificity of the data. More importantly, Isabella continued, you have done all this while maintaining customer satisfaction indices above 95% and generating specific service requests from German, Japanese, and even some American companies. Carlos leaned forward. Isabella, what are you getting at? We want to hire Maria as an external consultant to help us develop hidden talent identification protocols for our corporate clients. Your case is not just an inspiring story. It's a replicable model of organizational transformation. And the silence that followed was thick. Maria felt the world expanding around her in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Ms. Morrison, she finally said, I would need time to consider any external commitment. My primary loyalty is to LGI, and I have internal projects that are just beginning. Of course, but I want you to understand the magnitude of what you have achieved. You have not only changed your own trajectory, you have shown that organizations are massively wasting talent due to obsolete evaluation systems. After Isabella left, Carlos and Maria were left alone in the office, processing the implications of the conversation. Maria, this is getting bigger than any of us anticipated. I know, and it terrifies me. Why? Maria walked to the window, watching Madrid spread out under the twilight lights. Why was I invisible for 13 years? That invisibility was my refuge, my security. Now suddenly, I'm being observed by international consultants, invited to conferences, turned into what? A symbol? Carlos approached, understanding. Do you know the difference between a symbol and a real person, Maria? Symbols are static. Real people keep growing, learning, evolving. You're not a symbol of anything. You're just you, finally visible. His words touched something deep in Maria. She realized that she had been struggling not only with external success, but with the internal redefinition of who she was and what she could become. "Carlos, I want to show you something." Maria returned to her desk and took out a thick folder. "These are the profiles of 23 LGI employees who have significant competencies that have never been officially recognized. Roberto could lead our translation technology department. Anna could lead expansion into Francophone markets. Lucia could handle international economic analysis." Sweat Carlos opened the folder, his eyes moving quickly between the documents. "You documented all this in 3 weeks? I've been observing for 13 years, Carlos. Only now do I have the position to act on what I've seen. Maria, this is extraordinary, but it's also a huge responsibility. If we implement changes based on these recommendations, and some don't work, then we'll learn from the mistakes and adjust the approach. But if we don't try anything, we guarantee that these talents remain wasted forever." Carlos closed the folder, but Maria could see that his mind was already working on the possibilities. "All right, prepare a full presentation for the board of directors. If we're going to do this, we'll do it properly, with full institutional support." That night, as Maria helped Sophia with her math homework, her daughter observed her with curiosity. "Mom, why do you always seem to be thinking about very important things lately?" Maria smiled, recognizing her daughter's perceptiveness. "Because for the first time in a long time, I have the opportunity to do important things, to help people who have been waiting to be seen, just as I waited for years." "And does it scare you?" "It terrifies me, but it also excites me more than anything in my life." Sophia nodded with the seriousness of someone who had grown up understanding the complexities of adult life prematurely. "I think important things are always scary at first, Mom, but you've always been brave, even when you didn't realize it." Maria hugged her daughter, marveling at how moments of greatest clarity often came from the simplest observations. In her personal notebook that night, she wrote, "I've spent years wondering if someday someone would see me. Now I wonder if I'm ready for all that being seen means. But maybe preparation comes from doing, not from waiting." The LGI executive boardroom had never seemed so imposing. Maria stood in front of the oval mahogany table, with 8 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The entire board of directors, including Carlos as president, Elena as senior director, and 6 external advisors representing investors and strategic partners of the company. Her presentation of the project voice was loaded on the main screen, the result of weeks of research, case analysis, and financial projections she had developed with the discreet help of Lucia from accounting. Maria wore her best suit, but more importantly, she carried the conviction of someone who had lived the problem she proposed to solve. "Gentlemen advisors," she began with a firm voice despite her nerves. "Over the past 4 months, we have identified a troubling pattern in our organization: the systematic waste of internal talent due to structural biases in our evaluation and promotion processes." And she projected the first slide, showing statistics she had compiled on underutilized employees. "We currently have 47 employees with linguistic competencies that are not being used, 23 with academic training superior to that required by their current positions, and at least 15 with technical or specialized skills that could generate significant value if they were recognized and developed." One of the external advisors, an older man with a skeptical expression, raised his hand. "Ms. Rodriguez, these numbers are interesting, but how do we know that these hidden competencies would translate into effective performance in roles of greater responsibility?" Maria had anticipated this question and had a ready answer based on concrete cases. "Excellent question, Mr. Vasquez. Over the past 6 weeks, we have implemented a limited pilot with 5 employees. Ana Morales, originally a marketing intern, identified and corrected errors in our French campaign that would have cost approximately 300,000 euros in ineffective marketing. Roberto Jimenez, an IT technician, developed a translation system that is saving 15,000 euros monthly in external services. She projected a detailed results table. In 6 weeks, these 5 individuals have generated measurable value of 1.2 million euros while maintaining their original responsibilities. The ROI of investing in their professional development is 340% in the first quarter. A murmur of interest spread around the table. Elena, who had previously reviewed the data, nodded slowly. The numbers are consistent with what we have independently verified, she confirmed. Another advisor, Patricia Ruiz, leaned forward. Maria, the concept is attractive, but how do we propose to scale it without creating resentment among employees who did follow traditional career paths? This was the most difficult question, and Maria had struggled with it for weeks. Ms. Ruiz, Project Voice does not replace traditional promotion processes. It complements them. It's not about choosing between academic training and natural talent, but about recognizing that competence can manifest in multiple ways. Maria walked towards the window, using the movement to gain time and organize her thoughts. Furthermore, we have discovered that employees with traditional training benefit when they work with colleagues who bring different perspectives. Ana Morales doesn't replace our marketing specialists. She complements them with cultural knowledge they don't possess. Carlos leaned forward. What is the specifics proposal, Maria? I propose creating the LGI Internal Talent Program, a 6-month initiative where we systematically identify underutilized competencies, offer specific development opportunities, and measure results in terms of both individual performance and organizational impact. She projected the final slide, showing a detailed budget and implementation timeline. The initial cost is 150,000 euros, primarily for complementary training and mentoring. Based on the pilot results, we project a return on investment of 250% in the first year, and intangible benefits in employee morale, talent retention, and organizational innovation. The silence that followed was tense. Maria could hear her own heart beating as she awaited the board's reaction. Mr. Vasquez was the first to speak. It's a bold proposal, but it's also risky. If it fails, we could create unrealistic expectations and significant disruptions. Mr. Vasquez, Maria replied, the biggest risk is continuing to waste the talents we already have. Every underutilized employee represents a lost opportunity, and those losses accumulate silently year after year. Patricia Ruiz skimmed the documents Maria had distributed. Have you considered the legal implications, changes in responsibilities, salary adjustments, possible discrimination claims? We have consulted with our legal department. All proposed changes follow existing protocols for internal promotion and professional development. We are not creating new employment categories. We are applying existing policies more inclusively. Elena surprised everyone by speaking in Maria's favor. I have thoroughly reviewed this proposal. It is operationally sound, financially viable, and could give us a significant competitive advantage in the international market. The conversation continued for another hour, with technical questions, risk analysis, and discussions about implementation. Maria answered each question with specific data, concrete examples, and the confidence of someone who had lived the problem from both sides. Finally, Carlos called for a vote. All those in favor of implementing the 6-month LGI Internal Talents pilot program, with mandatory review at the end of the period. Maria held her breath as the advisors raised their hands one by one. 6 in favor, 2 abstentions, no votes against. "Approved," Carlos announced, and Maria felt her legs tremble with relief. After the advisors left, Carlos approached Maria, who was still standing by the window, processing what had just happened. "How do you feel?" "Terrified and excited in equal measure," Maria admitted. "Now I have to prove that everything I promised is possible." "Maria, you just convinced a skeptical board of directors to approve a program based entirely on your vision and experience. If you can do that, you can do anything." That afternoon, when Maria left the LGI building, she found a small group of employees waiting for her in the lobby. Anna was there, along with Roberto, Lucia, Manuel, and several others she had identified in her research. "Ms. Rodriguez," Anna said, speaking for the group, "we've heard rumors about the program. Is it true that the company is going to see us differently?" Maria looked at the hopeful faces in front of her, recognizing in each one her own hunger for recognition, her own desire to be seen for what they were truly capable of doing. "It's true," she replied, her voice emotional. "You will have the opportunity to show everything you can do, but you will also have to work harder than you ever have, because the eyes of the entire company will be on you." Roberto smiled. "If it's the opportunity to be valued for what we really know how to do, we're ready." As she walked home that night, Maria reflected on how her life had changed in so few months. She had gone from being invisible to leading an organizational change that could affect dozens of lives. The responsibility was overwhelming, but also deeply satisfying. In her notebook that night, she wrote, "Today I didn't just win a vote. I won the opportunity to demonstrate that real change is possible. Now comes the hardest part, making it work." 6 weeks after the approval of the Internal Talents Program, the LGI offices had developed a different energy. Maria arrived each morning to find emails from employees nominating colleagues for the program, interdepartmental project proposals, and progress reports documenting transformations that went beyond what she had initially imagined. Ana Morales had been officially promoted to cultural specialist for Francophone markets, and her first independent project had resulted in a €2.3 million contract with a Parisian hotel chain. Roberto Jimenez now led a small but innovative linguistic technology team, developing tools that were revolutionizing the company's operational efficiency. But the most surprising case had been that of Manuel Garcia, the courier technician whose fluent Mandarin had led LGI to explore opportunities in the Chinese market for the first time in its history. "Good morning, Maria," Manuel greeted, entering her office with a smile that had replaced his previously shy and withdrawn expression. "I have news from Beijing." Maria looked up from her computer, where she had been reviewing the program's monthly report. "Good or excellent?" "Excellent. The electronic components company wants to sign an exclusive distribution agreement for Spain. Initial value, €8.5 million. Maria felt a wave of pride and satisfaction. Manuel had gone from delivering packages to negotiating international contracts in less than 2 months. But his transformation had been the result of decades of invisible preparation. "How do you feel, Manuel?" "Like I've been waiting my whole life for this moment," he replied, with an honesty that touched Maria. "For 20 years, people saw me carrying boxes and thought that was all I could do. But I knew I had more to offer. I just needed someone to give me the opportunity." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Carlos, who seemed agitated. "Maria, we need to talk privately." Manuel apologized and left, but not before shaking Maria's hand with evident gratitude. "What's wrong, Carlos?" "I just received a call from the Munich headquarters. Our German partners are so impressed with the results of our program that they want to implement something similar in their European operations. They are specifically asking for you to lead the consulting." Maria sat down slowly, processing the implications. What exactly does that mean? It means we would have to create a separate organizational consulting division with you as director. It would mean traveling throughout Europe, working with multiple companies, scaling what we've achieved here to an international level. The offer was impressive, but Maria felt immediate uneasiness. "Carlos, my primary commitment is to the program here. These employees trusted me, and I committed to their development. I can't abandon them in the middle of the process." "I'm not suggesting you abandon them. I'm suggesting you expand your impact. Maria, what you've created here could transform the way European companies identify and develop talent." Before Maria could reply, her phone rang. It was Klaus Hoffmann. "Frau Rodriguez, I hope you're ready for Barcelona. We've had to change from a 500-seat auditorium to a 1,200-seat one. The interest in your presentation has exceeded all our expectations." After hanging up, Maria remained silent, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. "Maria," Carlos said softly, "I know this is a lot, but I want you to consider something. 6 months ago, you were invisible to almost everyone in this company. Now you have the opportunity to make wasted talent visible across Europe. Isn't that a natural extension of what you've been doing?" That afternoon, Maria decided to walk home instead of taking the subway, needing time to process the day's events. She passed by the park where she used to take Sophia when she was little, the same place where she had practiced languages by talking with tourists and immigrants. On a bench near the playground, she recognized Carmen, her former night shift colleague, watching her grandchildren play. Carmen greeted her, approaching cautiously. "Maria, what a surprise to see you here." They sat together on the bench, and Maria noticed that the tension between them had considerably diminished. "Carmen, how are things at work?" "Different. Better, I think. Since you started your program, the company seems more attentive, more interested in hearing what we have to say." Carmen paused, watching the children. "You know, my daughter is studying nursing at night. I always thought she'd have to find work somewhere else to use her training. But now I wonder if, perhaps, the company might be interested in having internal occupational health services." Maria smiled, recognizing the familiar pattern of hidden talent waiting to be discovered. "Carmen, you should talk to human resources about that. The program is specifically designed to identify competencies like your daughter's." "Do you really think they might be interested?" "I think you'll never know until you try, and I think you'd be surprised how many doors can open when you start talking about what you can really do." When she arrived home, Sophia was waiting for her with her homework books spread out on the kitchen table. "Mom, I need help with French. We have to write about our professional dreams." Maria sat down next to her daughter, but her mind was still processing the decisions she faced. "And what are your professional dreams, my love?" "I want to be like you," Sophia simply replied. "I want to help people who have talents that others don't see." Her daughter's words touched something deep in Maria. She realized that her transformation had not only affected her own life, but had created a model of possibility for the next generation. "Sophia, do you know what I've learned these past few months?" "What?" "That the most important dreams aren't the ones you have for yourself, but the ones you have to help others achieve theirs." That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Maria sat with her notebook and wrote a list of pros and cons about expanding her work internationally. But as she wrote, she realized that the decision wasn't about personal or professional benefits. It was about how many lives she could touch, how many hidden talents she could help emerge. On the last page of her notebook, she wrote, "For years, I was invisible because no one knew how to see me. Now I have the visibility to help others be seen. The question isn't whether I'm ready for more responsibility. The question is whether I'm ready to waste the opportunity to multiply the impact." At 2 a.m, she picked up her phone and wrote a message to Carlos. "I accept the proposal for European expansion, but with one condition. The LGI program must continue to develop independently, with a dedicated team that guarantees its continuity. The talents we have identified here deserve the same commitment I promised them from the beginning." His reply came in a few minutes. "Done. We start on Monday." The week before the Barcelona conference had been a whirlwind of preparation, nerves, and self-imposed pressure that kept Maria awake until the early hours. Her speech had been written, rewritten, and polished until every word carried the weight of years of lived experience. But beyond the technical words about talent development and organizational transformation, Maria knew she would have to share her personal story in a way she had been avoiding for months. On Friday morning, as she packed her suitcase for the trip to Barcelona, Sophia sat on her bed, observing her with a serious expression. "Mom, are you nervous?" "Terrified would be a more accurate description," Maria admitted, carefully folding the new suit she had bought for the occasion. "Why? You've spoken to important business people before." Maria paused, considering how to explain the difference between professional meetings and exposing herself to 1,200 people from 20 different countries. "It's different, my love. In meetings, I talk about specific work, concrete problems. In Barcelona, I have to talk about us, about our lives, our struggles, about the years when I thought I would never be more than invisible." Sophia came closer and took her mother's hand. "Mom, do you remember when I was scared of the school presentation about countries around the world?" "Yes, you chose Russia, and you were terrified of public speaking. And what did I tell you?" Maria smiled, remembering. "I told you to talk about what you knew better than anyone else in the class?" "Exactly. And no one in that room in Barcelona knows your story better than you do. No one has lived what you have lived, learned what you have learned, or helped the people you have helped." The wisdom of her 13-year-old daughter moved her deeply. Maria realized that she had been so focused on impressing the international audience that she had lost sight of the most powerful strength of her story, her authenticity. On Saturday morning, at the hotel in Barcelona, Maria woke up 2 hours before her presentation, with a churning stomach and sweaty palms. She had reviewed her speech so many times she could recite it by heart, but she still felt inadequate for the moment. Her phone vibrated with messages of support that had arrived during the night, from Ana, Roberto, Manuel, and, surprisingly, from Elena Herrera, who had written, "Maria, you're going to prove today that real leadership comes from lived experience, not academic degrees. Make us proud." The auditorium of the Palau de Congressos was imposing. 1,200 seats arranged in ascending tiers, with simultaneous translation systems and giant screens that would project every gesture, every facial expression. Maria watched from backstage as Klaus Hoffmann gave the introduction, describing her trajectory in a way that made her sound almost mythical. And now, Klaus concluded, I present to you a woman who has redefined our understanding of hidden talent, Maria Rodriguez from Madrid. Applause resonated as Maria walked towards the podium, feeling that each step required conscious effort. When she reached the microphone, she looked out at the sea of expectant faces and felt a moment of absolute panic. But then, in the third row, she saw a familiar face. Carlos had traveled from Madrid to support her, and his encouraging smile gave her the strength she needed. "Good morning," she began, her voice gradually growing firmer. "My name is Maria Rodriguez, and until 8 months ago, I was invisible." The auditorium fell into absolute silence. For 13 years, I cleaned offices in a logistics company in Madrid. I arrived at 11 at night and left at 7 in the morning. I scrubbed floors, emptied waste baskets, cleaned windows. For most people in that company, I didn't exist. When Maria paused, allowing the reality of her words to resonate in the auditorium. But while cleaning those offices, I was also studying 9 languages, international commercial law, business cultures, not in prestigious universities, but in public libraries, with secondhand books, listening to podcasts during my 15-minute breaks. She moved away from the podium, closer to the audience. Why am I telling you this? Because every organization represented in this room has a Maria Rodriguez working in it. People with extraordinary talents who remain invisible because we wear the wrong uniforms, work the wrong hours, or simply don't fit the traditional expectations of what competence should look like. A murmur of recognition swept through the auditorium. During these months, I've helped identify more than 50 underutilized employees in my company, a courier technician who now negotiates multi-million-dollar contracts in Mandarin, an intern who has become our cultural specialist for European markets, an IT technician who developed algorithms superior to commercial systems that cost hundreds of thousands of euros. Maria projected a slide with photographs of Ana, Roberto, Manuel, and other program participants, along with their specific achievements. These are not exceptional cases. They are the norm when we start looking for talent where it truly exists, not just where we expect to find it. An executive in the front row raised his hand. "Ms. Rodriguez, how do we systematically identify these hidden talents?" We start by changing a fundamental question. Instead of asking, "What credentials do you have?" we ask, "What problems can you solve?" Instead of, "Where did you study?" we ask, "What have you learned?" Maria walked to the other side of the stage, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. But more importantly, we start by questioning our own blind spots. How many times have you walked past someone who could revolutionize your organization, but you didn't see them because you were busy looking for talent in predictable places? A woman in the center of the auditorium stood up. "How do we convince boards of directors to invest in people without traditional career paths?" "With data," Maria replied immediately. "In 8 months, our program has generated more than 15 million euros in new value, avoided losses of another 8 million, and improved our operational efficiency by 23%. These are not emotional numbers. They are measurable business results." Maria projected a new slide with detailed ROI charts. But there's something more important than financial return. The human return. When an organization recognizes and develops hidden talent, it not only gains competencies, it gains loyalty, innovation, and a culture of possibility that transforms every aspect of its operation. Time was running out, and Maria approached the most personal moment of her presentation. I want to finish by telling you about a message I received last week. It was from a student in Mexico who had seen a video of my story on social media. He wrote to me, "Ms. Rodriguez, my mother cleans offices and speaks 5 languages. I always felt ashamed of her work. After hearing your story, I realized I should feel proud, not ashamed. Thank you for helping me see my mother as she truly is." Emotion slightly broke her voice, but she continued. That message reminded me why I'm here today. It's not just about transforming organizations. It's about transforming the way we see human value. It's about recognizing that talent has no uniform, no schedule, no pedigree. Maria returned to the podium for her conclusion. Each of you will return to your organizations with the opportunity to seek out the Maria Rodriguezes who work in your companies. Some clean offices, others work in cafeterias, archives, maintenance. Some have degrees they never mention, languages they never use, skills they've never had the opportunity to demonstrate. The question isn't whether these talents exist in your organizations. They do. The question is whether you have the vision to see them and the courage to cultivate them. The applause began slowly and built into a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Maria felt tears in her eyes as she watched 1,200 professionals from all over Europe recognizing not only her story, but the broader principle it represented. After the presentation, she was surrounded by executives, consultants, academics, all with specific questions about implementation, methodology, case studies. But the conversation that moved her most was with a young woman who approached her at the end. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm a night cleaner at a technology company in Berlin. I also study programming in my free time. Your story has given me hope that perhaps someday someone will see what I can really do." Maria took the young woman's hands. "Don't wait for someone to see you. Look for ways to show what you can do. Prepare proposals, identify problems you can solve, document your work. Invisible talent only remains invisible if it doesn't find ways to make itself visible." 6 months after Barcelona, Maria found herself in a position she had never imagined. Director of LGI's newly created Hidden Talent Development Division, with consulting contracts in 12 European countries and a waiting list of companies that wanted to implement similar programs. Her office had been relocated to the 15th floor with a panoramic view of Madrid. But what satisfied her most was the Maria Rodriguez room on the 12th floor, a training space where employees met every week to develop competencies that had remained dormant for years. Ana Morales now directed the Francophone International Expansion Department. Roberto Jimenez had patented 3 technological innovations that were being licensed to other companies. Manuel Garcia had become the main bridge between LGI and the Asian market, generating more than 20 million euros in new contracts. But not everything had been a success. 3 employees in this program had returned to their original positions, discovering that the increased responsibility wasn't what they expected. 2 traditional managers had requested transfers, feeling that their roles had been devalued, and Elena Herrera had announced her early retirement. "It's not because I disagree with what you've achieved," Elena had explained during their last conversation. "It's because I've realized that I represent a leadership model that is becoming obsolete, and it's time for people like you to take control." On Friday afternoon, as Maria reviewed reports of the European implementations, Carlos entered her office with an expression that mixed emotion and concern. "Maria, we need to talk about something important." "What's wrong?" Carlos sat down. but seemed unable to sit still. I just received a proposal from the European Commission. They want to create a continental pilot program based on our model, directed from Brussels, with a budget of 50 million euros to identify and develop hidden talent in Ford companies in WA countries. Maria felt her breath catch. And they want you to lead the entire program. The silence that followed was thick. Maria stood up and walked to the window, watching Madrid spread out under the afternoon sun. Carlos, this is overwhelming, I know, but it's also an opportunity to impact millions of lives, Maria. To institutionalize at a continental level the transformation you've started here. And what about LGI? What about the programs we have in development? What about the people who depend on the continuity of what we've built? Carlos approached, understanding. We've grown to the point where we can operate independently. The program is institutionalized, you have a solid team, and the results speak for themselves. Maria, you have created something bigger than any individual company. That night at family dinner, Sophia immediately noticed that her mother was distracted. What's wrong, Mom? You seem to be on another planet. Maria smiled, marveling at her daughter's perceptiveness. I've been offered a very important job, my love, but it would mean moving to Brussels, completely changing our lives again. Is it a job you want to do? It's a job that could help millions of people like us. People who have talents that no one sees, who work in the shadows waiting for their opportunity. Sophia considered this seriously. Mom, do you remember when you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up? Yes, you said you wanted to be like me. Exactly. I want to help people that others don't see. If you can do that for millions of people, then we should do it. Sophia's words touched the core of the decision Maria had been avoiding facing. You wouldn't mind leaving Madrid, your friends, your school? Mom, for years we moved apartments every time the rent went up. We changed neighborhoods. I changed schools. But we never changed who we were. Madrid isn't our home because it's here. It's our home because we're together. That night, after Sophia fell asleep, Maria took her notebook and wrote a list she had been avoiding for weeks. It wasn't a list of pros and cons about the European offer. It was a list of all the people whose lives had changed in recent months. Anna, Roberto, Manuel, Lucia, Carmen, dozens of other LGI employees, hundreds of people in European companies that had adopted the program. But she also thought about the conversations she had had with executives in Barcelona, about the emails she received weekly from people around the world, sharing their own stories of invisible talent, about the responsibility she felt towards a movement that had grown beyond her original intentions. At 3 a.m, she picked up her phone and wrote an email to the European Commission. I accept to lead the Continental Program with one non-negotiable condition. The focus must remain on real human impact, not on political metrics or abstract statistics. Every euro invested must translate into concrete opportunities for real people with real talents who have remained invisible for too long. Her reply came 2 hours later. Condition accepted. Welcome to the team that will transform the future of talent in Europe. 2 years later, Maria found herself in a conference room in Brussels, surrounded by reports documenting the success of the European Hidden Talent Program. The numbers were impressive. 15,000 employees identified and developed. 500 million euros in value generated. Successful implementation in 23 countries. But the numbers that truly mattered were different. 15,000 individual stories of transformation. 15,000 people who had gone from being invisible to being valued. 15,000 families whose lives had changed because someone had finally seen their potential. Her phone vibrated with a message from Ana Morales, now director of LGI France. "Maria, we just closed the biggest contract in the company's history. 50 million euros, with a hotel chain that wants to expand into Spain. All because they recognize that we understand both markets and cultures. Thank you for teaching us that we could be more than we appeared." Maria smiled, remembering the shy young woman who had entered her office 2 years ago, asking for advice on how to be seen. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Sophia, now 15, who had just arrived from the international school. "How was your day, my love?" "Interesting. We had a project on transformational leadership, and I chose to write about you." Maria raised an eyebrow, amused. "About me?" "Well, technically, about the concept of invisible talent, and how recognition can change not only individual careers, but entire organizational cultures." Maria laughed, marveling at how her daughter had grown up speaking naturally about concepts that had taken her years to fully comprehend. "And what conclusion did you reach?" Sophia sat in the chair in front of her mother's desk, with the seriousness she had developed from living closely through such a dramatic transformation. "That the most important thing you've done wasn't changing your own life. It was showing that changing one life can create ripples that change thousands of lives." Her words touched something deep in Maria. She realized that her daughter had grasped the essence of what had happened better than many of the academic reports written about her work. "Sophia, do you know what the most important lesson from these years has been?" "What?" "That I was never truly invisible. I was visible to the right people, to you, to the immigrant parents I helped with translations, to the students I tutored, to the families in the neighborhood who knew they could count on me. The problem wasn't that I was invisible. The problem was that I was visible in the wrong places." Maria walked to her office window, from where she could see Brussels stretching towards the horizon. And Carlos was right when he said my job was to make others visible in the right places too. Her reflection was interrupted by her assistant, who entered with a thick folder. "Ms. Rodriguez, these are the final reports for the program. They are ready for your presentation to the European Parliament next week." Maria took the folder, feeling the weight of 2 years of intensive work. But more than weight, she felt deep satisfaction. The program had exceeded all expectations and, more importantly, had created a cultural shift in how organizations thought about talent. "Thank you, Laura. Is there anything else for today?" "Yes, you have a call from Madrid. Mr. Mendoza from LGI." Maria took the call, feeling a wave of nostalgia as she heard Carlos's voice. "Maria, I have news that I think will excite you." "What's up?" "We've just been named European Company of the Year in Human Resources Innovation. The jury specifically said that the model you developed has redefined best practices in talent development for the entire industry." Maria felt tears of emotion in her eyes. "Carlos, that's incredible. But there's more. They want you to receive the award on behalf of the company. The ceremony is in Madrid next month." After hanging up, Maria remained silent, processing the strange circularity of returning to Madrid as a guest of honor, in a city where she had spent years being invisible. That night, as she had dinner with Sophia in their apartment in Brussels, her daughter asked her a question that surprised her. "Mom, when you receive the award in Madrid, are you going to talk about the past or the future?" "What do you mean? Could you talk about how you were invisible before, about the struggle, about personal transformation? Or could you talk about where all this is going, about the people who are still waiting to be seen, about what still needs to be done?" Maria considered the question deeply. What do you think I should do? I think you should talk about the future. Everyone already knows your past story, but only you know where we could go from here. 1 month later, Maria stood in the same auditorium in Madrid, where Carlos had organized her first meeting with German executives 3 years earlier. But now the audience was different. 2,000 people, including European ministers, CEOs of the continent's leading companies, and representatives of international organizations. In the front row, she could see familiar faces: Carlos, Ana, Roberto, Manuel, even Elena Herrera, who had come out of retirement to attend. And in a place of honor, Sofia, now a confident young woman who had grown up watching her mother transform not only her own life, but an entire industry. 3 years ago, Maria began, I was cleaning this very room at 3 in the morning, invisible to almost everyone who is here now. Today, I stand before you, not because my story is unique, but because my story is universal. She moved away from the podium, closer to the audience. In every organization represented here, there are people with extraordinary talents who remain unrecognized. Not because they aren't competent, but because we have been trained to look for competence in limited places, in predictable ways. Maria projected an image showing statistics from the programs implemented across Europe. In 2 years, we have shown that when we broaden our definition of where talent can exist, we not only find exceptional competencies, we find innovation, loyalty, and perspectives that transform entire organizations. But this is just the beginning. Every person we have helped develop becomes a mentor for others. Every organization that changes its approach becomes a role model for its competitors. Every transformation story creates possibility for hundreds more stories. Maria paused, looking directly at Sofia in the front row. The future I see is not a world where cases like mine are extraordinary. It is a world where they are normal, where talent is recognized regardless of the uniform it wears, the hours it works, or the credentials it may or may not have. She approached the end of her presentation, feeling the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. My name is Maria Rodriguez. I was invisible for 40 years of my life, but I never stopped being capable. I never stopped being competent. I never stopped having value. I simply needed someone to have the vision to see me and the courage to bet on what they saw. Each of you has the power to be that person for someone else. Each of you can choose to see beyond the obvious, beyond the comfortable, beyond the traditional. Maria returned to the podium for her final conclusion. Talent is not scarce. The vision to recognize it is. But that vision can be developed. It can be taught. It can be institutionalized. And when we do that, we will not only transform organizations, we will transform lives, families, entire communities. The applause was deafening and prolonged, but what moved Maria most was seeing Ana, Roberto, Manuel, and other participants from the original program standing, applauding not only for her speech, but for the opportunity they had received to become the best version of themselves. After the ceremony, as the guests mingled at the reception, Maria found a quiet moment with Sofia on a terrace. How do you feel, Mom? Like I've completed a very long circle, but also like I'm starting a new one. What comes next? Maria looked towards Madrid, the city where she had struggled for years to survive, where she had raised her daughter alone, where she had studied in public libraries and practiced languages in parks. Now she saw it not as the place where she had been invisible, but as the place where she had learned that invisibility was temporary, but ability was permanent. What comes next is to keep reminding the world that human brilliance exists everywhere. We just need to have eyes to see it and a heart to cultivate it. Sophia smiled, taking her mother's hand. Mom, do you know my favorite part of this whole story? What? That you never stopped being you. With the new office, the trips, the awards, the conferences, you're still the same woman who helped me with my homework in our tiny kitchen and who saw possibilities where others saw nothing. Maria hugged her daughter, feeling that all the struggles, all the fears, all the nights of silent study had been worth it for this moment of mutual understanding. And you're still the reason I never gave up, my love. As they watched Madrid light up with the evening lights, Maria reflected on the extraordinary journey that had taken them from a small apartment in Carabanchel to a terrace in the city center, celebrating a change that had impacted lives across an entire continent. But more than external recognition, what she valued most was the certainty that she had proven something fundamental. That every person has a unique brilliance waiting to be discovered, and that sometimes all it takes is for someone to stop long enough to truly see it. In her notebook that night, she wrote the final entry. The brilliance was never hidden. It was just waiting for the right moment, the right person, and enough courage to shine unapologetically. Now, my job is to make sure others find their moment, their person, and their courage. If you liked this video, please like it, subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends, and leave us your opinion in the comments. Your support helps us continue creating more content like this. Don't forget to activate notifications to stay updated on our next exciting stories.